Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 1976 giallo film, The House with Laughing Windows, and it's one I've been meaning to get to for quite some time now. So, checking it off the list, and I like this. Quick disclaimer, my energy level may not be as high as normal for this video. You'll have to excuse me on that. A combination of allergies and sinus issues just really kicking me today. So, my apologies on that. But I'm going to do my best to talk about The House with Laughing Windows. Directed by Pupi Avati. I assume it said Pupi. It's P-U-P-I. Very unfortunate. Who also did films Thomas and the Bewitched, Bordella, Revenge of the Dead, Arcane Sorcerer, and The Hideout. Written by Pupi Avati as well as Antonio Avati, who also wrote scripts for Thomas and the Bewitched, Bordella, Macabre, Revenge of the Dead as well. And Gianni Cavina, who also worked on the script for Bordella. So all three of them worked on that one. The house used for the shooting location, the really rundown one, the house with laughing windows, was actually demolished not long after the film ended up coming out. I mean, you can kind of see why. It definitely looks like it's in significant disrepair, which is probably the reason they chose it for the film. I think it was a good choice because obviously they could actually, do the painting of the laughing windows onto the structure. And also, it served to look like an old abandoned house, which is exactly what they were going for there. I mean, obviously that ending up being the kind of dumping ground for the bodies from the Legnani sisters, which I'm just going to call them the sisters from now on because I'm going to refer to Legnani as, the painter. I even forget what his first name was. Something with a B. The intro of the guy strung up being stabbed while the heavy breathing person talks about colors in a metaphorical way is pretty disturbing. Very disturbing start to it when the opening credits are rolling for sure, and I like the fact that they bring that audio back later, and then it literally shows you later on in the film that what's being shown in the opening sequence or opening credit sequence is this ritual that Legnani's sisters have just been continually going through, even after Legnani's been gone, because they just keep doing it. They think they're pleasing him even in death at this point. So it's just this thing where they're getting someone, they're stringing them up, which I think they're having people brought to them by Lidio is Lydio is how his name is spelled, I believe. But yeah, like he's bringing people to them and then they're stringing them up, sacrificing them while they play the audio of Legnani talking about, the colors and the syphilis and all that stuff. And his dead body's preserved there. But we'll talk more about that when we get to that point in the film. The artwork Stefano is brought in to restore in the church looks a lot like a depiction of what was happening in the opening credits, which I'm assuming most people kind of put that together initially. It's pretty obvious, in my opinion, that what you're seeing in the opening credits and then what is being depicted in this painting is the same thing. And within the context of the story, it is the same thing. It really is. It works really well. I like that they keep having these things kind of popping back up within the film. Works really well. The first big red herring, Lidio polishing the cross and shooting a creepy glance at Stefano, and then he gets even more creepy later when he's talking about the mice, and then when he's trying to force himself on Francesca. He is clearly a super strong red herring, and they introduce him so early in the film. This is something that giallo films do a lot, throwing in someone who they want you to heavily look at as the obvious person who's going to be killing people. Now, obviously, in the end, he's involved to a, lesser degree, and he kind of knows what's actually happening, which, his behavior kind of leads on to that a little bit. From time to time, him kind of like laughing about questions that Stefano ends up having of him that are related to, the larger story that's going on here. So, yeah. Typical giallo with a person speaking in strained whispers on the phone. I suppose there's something about that painting. So, yes. The fact that they're so upset that Stefano is there to kind of restore that painting gives you a clue that everything going on, that, deaths that are going to be happening, or what the bigger story is going to definitely tie into that painting, because he's getting this threatening, call with this strained whisper, like I said, is used in giallo films all the time. And you could tell it was a female voice if you really listen. You could tell it was a female voice. So the Legnani sisters twist later on, makes perfect sense at that point. So I was thinking female as we were going through the film because of that. But, so it becomes obvious that people don't want him to restore that painting. And then as soon as he does restore the painting, not even fully, but a very good amount of it is defaced once again with the acid that he goes and asks the shop owner about. And he's just like, I don't know, I get acid all, I sell acid to everyone every single day, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but, maybe it was true at that point. I don't know. Antonio alludes to having had a nervous breakdown, which does cast a little bit of a suspicion on him early on, but then he also speaks of some secret about the painting that he needs to share with Stefano. This makes you think that he's going to end up being dead soon because he has a secret to tell Stefano. This is one of the other rules in giallo films that I don't think it was like an actual rule. I think it just ended up happening a lot, where if someone in the film really needs to give some information to a character, they're not going to give it to him right then. They'll do it later. They're like, oh, there's too many people around, I don't want people to hear, which is kind of how Antonio was acting. And then 2, they're never going to be able to tell him that information because they're going to be killed before they can. So I immediately knew, yes, this is a giallo film. Antonio really needs to tell Stefano something, but he can't do it in public. He's going to die. And he does. He goes flying out the window, and you get the idea the police don't really care about doing their jobs, or they know what's actually going on, and they're not trying to get involved because they don't listen to Stefano when he's saying, look, I know Antonio, he did not kill himself. Plus the fact that I saw a silhouette of a person when I got there. I literally saw Antonio fall out of the window, and then there's a silhouette of a person in the room from which he fell. And they're like, there's no motive. Like, that's literally what the policeman says. He's like, there's no motive. But this goes with what happens in giallo anyway all the time, which is the police officers are always either stupid or useless, or both of those things. And in this instance, I don't think it's stupid. I just think it's useless, and I think it's potentially intentionally useless, because I think they may know what's going on. Because you get that idea that everyone kind of knows what's going on to some degree, because the ending, towards the ending, when Stefano's been stabbed and he goes into town and he's literally knocking on doors trying to get some help as he's bleeding to death, and people literally are looking out their windows and then just being like, nope, not getting involved in this. Stefano wastes no time getting on with the teacher. And I will be honest, I thought there was going to be something else going on with the teacher. I did think the teacher would end up being one of the Legnani sisters, because she just disappears out of nowhere real quick. And she disappears right after Antonio had died. So they did a really good job with that red herring. I fell for that one. That was pretty good. It is also just weird. Let's just talk about this. It is also just weird that he sleeps with this teacher, which I don't even think we get her name. She's just like teacher. Then he goes back to where she lives. She's gone after his buddy dies. And then, but who's there is Francesca. And then she just like invites him in, and then they just start this, romance. And he's not really questioning too much how she just like up and left, and then Francesca's been there the whole time. It's just like, I don't know, it's kind of weird. It's a very weird thing. And Francesca assumes her job, like she takes over the teacher's job. Weird. The guy being roughed up by the cops in the restaurant seems like a red herring as well, because he shows that he has a bit of a temper. That was a very quick red herring because he doesn't really show up again. Very odd little situation to be thrown in there, but that is what giallo films do. They'll throw in a lot of things that seem like maybe they're going to go somewhere, but they end up not really going anywhere. So the lady carrying the dog seems like a potential suspect due to her sneaking nature, but also seems kind of benign at the same time. And that's one of the reasons that I thought that she would be... I'm trying to kind of straighten this out a little bit because it's actually bothering me. I don't know if it's bothering anyone else, but yeah, she seemed like a pretty solid red herring as well, because she just seems so benign, like I said, but she's sneaking around. So it just made you feel like Since she doesn't really seem like a threat, but she's also being sneaky, she could have something to do with what's going on. In the end, she really doesn't. Unless, like a lot of other people, it seems, in the town, she just knows what's going on and is not going to say anything. Of course, Antonio falls to his death. He had something to tell Stefano. Already talked about that one. Many people in town seem to be putting walls up with Stefano. They don't want to answer questions. They don't want to have much to do with him. The police dismiss him when he says he saw a figure after Antonio fell out of the window, and the lady at the hotel tells Stefano that he has to get out so she can rent his room to tourists, when it's later said that the tourist excuse is actually nothing. Like, it's an excuse. Like, she's literally just trying to get him out of the hotel, which I'm assuming he was paying for. Or at least the guy who brought him in there, Salome, was paying for. Like, someone was paying for his room, but this lady's like, I need you to get out of here because there are tourists coming in. And he doesn't really even question. He's just like, okay, bye. And then it's later that, is it Francesca who tells him? Someone tells him, like, we haven't had tourists in this town in, like, 40 years. And it's like, okay. So she seemed really suspicious at that point, too. But she strikes me as, in retrospect, probably just one of those people who knew what was going on, but's not actually involved necessarily. The old house Stefano is allowed to stay at looks nicely dark and creepy. Yes, that would be the house that the sister Laura lives in, which I don't think we get the actual name of the other sister. We just know that sister up until being revealed for who they actually are. We know that sister as De Rossi, who we think is the priest at this church. So yeah, but nice creepy house. Really like the way they use that. I'll say something at the very end of the film on how they used it, which I was big into. Between Stefano hearing someone walking around at night and the fact that we see the guy who brought him there hand his luggage to another person, it seems that Stefano is probably in danger. Lidio, when he takes his luggage up to where he's going to be staying, like we see him hand it and someone's arm comes out and takes it from him. But then it's said later by Laura when she's in bed that, she's like, it's only me. And like Lidio comes and does things for me and checks in on me. And that's like it. But we saw a third person. So at that point, we know Laura is hiding something. We then see the flowers that are in her room that are the same flowers that were put next to the painting that Stefano was restoring. So we know that Laura has something to do with this. We see the extra person in the house. And we know that since Stefano's staying there and these things seem very off, he's potentially in danger. And he is. Certainly a connection between the flowers at the painting and the ones in Laura's room will come to light, and it obviously does. They don't specifically talk about it later, but you see the connection. I like the slowly paced, creepy basement scene with the recording from the opening credits playing. Love that. That's the first time it gets used after the opening credits, and then the second time is when the sisters are actually doing the ritual later. So I really love that scene. I love the way it was shot. I love the use of lighting and how there are a bunch of like dark corners down there. And it looks creepy. Like I said, like it was a very nicely creepy old place. So I like that sequence. Plus, the recording being played just adds that extra element because it's a very disturbing tape. Let's be honest. Once it's revealed that the bedridden woman has a venereal disease, it makes you think there's a connection to Legnani the painter. Then the flowers on top of that. Now, the venereal disease, the connection that's supposed to be is the fact that it's then also... Actually, I think it's even before the venereal disease portion is revealed. It's revealed that Legnani had two sisters, and he was having sexual relations with his sisters. And it was said that Legnani had syphilis. So when you think about it, when it's said that Laura, who's bedridden, is bedridden because of a venereal disease, you should be able to make the connection of her venereal disease with Legnani's venereal disease, and then that would lead you to believe that they were related because it was said that Legnani was having sex with his sister. So obviously he passed syphilis to her, or at least that's what's insinuated there. And now Francesca potentially has a connection to Legnani with the BL lighter. Also, it's odd that she all of a sudden lives in the teacher's apartment and just accepts a relationship with Stefano. Obviously, red herring situation going on with her for sure. And it seems so suspicious because she just pops up out of nowhere. Like, it really does. So I think that was it seems like lazy writing, but it's also good in the context of a giallo film because it gets people to think that there's something else going on if they've seen enough giallo films. So I like that aspect of it. So you learn Legnani was painting people who were dying and that he had sisters he was sleeping with. Mental note at that point. This literally is one of those films where you're slowly getting a trickle of information on Legnani as the film goes on, and you just need to like mentally compile that information as it goes on and relate it to what's actually happening within the film. So it's the historical information that you're fed piece by piece, then apply that to the actual story that's playing out in front of you. Pretty good intrigue when Stefano finds Antonio's notes and it talks of possible sacrifices. And then the realization that Legnani's sisters look like the people stabbing the martyr in the painting in the church. That's another cool development. And I really do think that, obviously as a giallo film, a lot of giallo films had kind of slower pacing. This one does have slower pacing. But I think the intervals in which they have these little breadcrumbs of information about what's really going on drop is good. It keeps your interest. It keeps you relatively engaged, even though the pacing is slower. So I like that about the film. They focus quite a bit on the white powder right outside of the rundown little house. Now, I'm not 100% sure what that's supposed to be. Is that supposed to be the acid that you find out was used later on destroying the painting after Stefano restored it? I think maybe that was it. Or maybe that was just supposed to insinuate that was like lime to help in covering up the smell of the bodies that were being buried there. Because that was at the house with the laughing windows. So, yeah. Which, by the way, the title is The House with Laughing Windows because that's kind of where the whole ritual started. It all goes back to that place, and there were still bodies buried there. So that's the origin, basically, of the entire backstory of what's going on. Legnani set himself on fire, and his body was never found. The film, at that point, when you get that information, you're just like, this keeps getting more and more wild. Because you just get all these really wild bits of information about him, like painting people who are dying, potential sacrifices. He lit himself on fire. He was having sex with his sisters. He was painting himself, looking in a mirror because he was having a hard time getting models. Like, just a lot of really wild things going on. But hey, that's giallo, and that's what makes a good giallo. I like when Stefano pulls out a vial of green liquid and starts doing a chemistry experiment with the scrapings off the defaced painting. I don't know, is that a thing that people who restore paintings have available? They just have like this chemistry set that they bring with them. It just seemed like a weird thing. They just like pulls out this vial kind of out of nowhere. It seemed like it has a green liquid in it already, put those scrapings in there, and then he's putting it over a burner. And you're just like, do you know how to science? Do you know how to science, really? You painting restorer? I don't get it. So, does Coppola allude to being paid in grappa to not tell anyone about Legnani's sisters? He literally says something about that he says it like he was being paid in grappa to basically just, they keep him like an unreliable drunk. But he alludes to the fact that like he knows the information about the sisters and everything that's gone on, but yet he won't say anything because he's been given free booze. And it's just kind of like, that's kind of weird. Like, they could have just killed him and probably like would have and should have just done that because they've killed plenty of people and they keep needing people for their rituals there, I don't know why I was doing that. That didn't make sense. They needed people for their rituals. They actually did, not this. One of those moments. Not sure why Lydio keeps talking about the lady upstairs when he's trying to force himself on Francesca. You do get the idea, though, that he's, for lack of a better term, a lackwit. That's kind of like an old term for someone who's, has a mental deficiency. So yeah, you get the idea that he's a special needs individual, which makes it even worse that like he's really being taken advantage of to kind of do some dirty work for these terrible people. But yeah, it was really weird that he was just doing that. He was just like, he's like, do you want to know who the lady upstairs is? Do you want to know who she is? Well, he's trying to force himself on her. It's very odd. But hey, that's giallo. And they finally reveal the house with laughing windows, which was cool. And I was just like, oh, there it is. The house from the title. Love it. It looked cool. And once Francesca is found dead, she was just there to be killed in the first place. a little bit red herring-ish because of the lighter that says BL that they find. But in the end, she was really just introduced to get close to Stefano. Us, as an audience, kind of care for her to some degree because Stefano does. And then she gets killed. She was there for a body count. And then at that point, between her getting killed and between, at this point, Coppola getting killed, who's now willing to talk because he's off the sauce, it feels like the walls are kind of starting to close in on Stefano. It feels like, since there are people very close in his orbit being offed, that he's going to be next. And that's what ends up happening. He is next. Not much time between Francesca dying and Coppola being found dead. That's what helps to create that feeling of the walls closing in around him, so I thought they did that well. Stefano really has to start feeling like he's losing it when he gets the call that's the recording of Francesca saying that she's at home. But I believe he sees through it because he can hear that she's crying in it. She does sound distressed, even though she's like, "Come home to me, I'm at home." That was obviously recorded under duress. You know, she's being told to do that, and then they killed her. But then they did a really good job of cleaning up after themselves because he leads the police there, and then they're just like, "Where'd the body?" So they do a really good job of making, of setting the whole situation up to make it look like Stefano is losing it in front of the police. So then he's basically becoming an unreliable person to get information from, just like Coppola, you know, just being a consistent drunk. A pretty wild scene when Stefano finds the sisters stabbing a dude, and then the skeleton of like Nani is revealed in an armoire preserved in formalin, as they tell you, in formalin. That, like, first of all, it was wild because they like reveal him in this armoire like a skeleton, basically. That's why the body was never found, because they kept him. And then when they get a closer in shot, you see he's like in a tank in the armoire that has liquid in it, and that's how he's being fully preserved. And it's like, all right, this is one crazy scene. It's a good scene though. I really like that moment. I'm just like, man, they're really going for it in this one. Why isn't Stefano more on alert before he gets stabbed? It's like he let down all his defenses for no really good reason in that situation. He literally walks in on two people stabbing someone to death. One of them then reveals to him that there's a dead body being preserved in an armoire. Why would you not be on guard? Why would you totally let down all your defenses? It's like he was dumbstruck and then he just gets stabbed. Like, dude, you should have not gotten that close, been more aware of your surroundings. It doesn't actually make a whole lot of sense. So nobody will help Stefano when he's bleeding to death. Yeah, that's why I think that kind of like everyone in the town was kind of knew something about what was going on. Well, didn't see it coming that De Rossi would be the other sister. I did suspect him maybe being involved when he's the only person who actually accepts a bleeding Stefano into his house. I did think maybe he has some sort of involvement here because we were getting towards the end of the film, and I'm like, he's been a pretty quiet character. Maybe he's involved. So he did end up being involved. Ends up being a she. It's the other sister. I do think it's funny how they just show like the close-up of the one boob, and you're just like, oh yeah, that does it. Obviously, it was a male actor who did the role, and then they just changed the voice later. So I guess De Rossi was just really good at changing their voice. I don't know. And then those robes, those preacher robes, just really help cover up boobs. Where it ends, you don't really know what the police will be doing. I assume that Stefano will end up being framed for the murders. That was my guess. Because the very end, they have this big reveal. Laura's there, and De Rossi is revealed as the other sister, and Stefano's shocked, and then you just hear the police sirens, and then that's it. So I was like, okay, so what's going to happen? I'm assuming what would end up happening is De Rossi would go back into clergy mode and would basically be like, this person did it. Like, it really did seem to me this whole time they were playing the long game of being able to bring this new, like, set this new person up to look like he was committing the murders because of how unreliable they made him look to police, and because of just like the people within his vicinity who he was interacting with a good amount end up being dead. So, just saying. The last thing I want to say about the film is they use all of the areas of the old house pretty well, the one that the sisters were in. And there always seems to be dark corners, which really does help with atmosphere. I really, really like that about the film. So it looked good. I mean, it had a cool story. I did like it all over. So as a giallo film, out of 5 stars with half stars in play, you know, I think this is a really good 3.5-star film. Thought about going 4, but I don't think it's quite there. 3.5 stars feels really good to me, but I wouldn't blame people if they're going 4 on it. But yeah, would love to know your thoughts on this film. Go ahead and put it down in the comments. Love it, hate it in between. Give me like a sentence or two letting me know why. Do me a quick favor. Hit subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Hit the notification bell button if you haven't. Those things really help me out. I really appreciate it. But regardless, thanks for taking your time to watch this video. And until next time, keep it brutal.